The Signalman from Christmas Stories. A ghost story. When I first called down to him, I was so steeped in the glow of an angry sunset that I had to shade my eyes before I saw him at all. Hello! Below there! His figure was in shadow. He was standing at the door of his signal box with a flag in his hand. But instead of looking up to where I stood, on the top of the steep cutting over his head, he turned round and looked the other way, down the line. There was something remarkable in his manner of doing so, but at that moment I could not for my life have said what. Now, of course, as I look back, I called again. Is there any path by which I can come down and explore? He turned round again, looked up and saw me, but made no reply. Just then there came a vague vibration in the earth and air, changing to a violent pulsation, then an oncoming rush that caused me to start back as though it had force to draw me down. When such vapour as rose to my height had passed me, I looked down again. He was refurling the flag which he'd shown while the train went by, and he was regarding me with fixed attention. I called a third time. Is there a way down? He now motioned with his flag towards a rough zigzag path, which I followed. The cutting was extremely deep, through stone that became oozier and clammier. The way down was long enough for me to recall the singular air of reluctance with which he had pointed out the path. He was standing between the rails by which the train had passed, as if he were waiting for me. He had his left hand at his chin, and his right hand held his elbow. His attitude was of such expectation and watchfulness that I stopped wondering at it, and then I drew nearer. His post was in as solitary and dismal a place as ever I saw. On either side a dripping wet wall of jagged rock, excluding all view but a strip of sky. The perspective one way, a crooked prolongation of this great dungeon. The shorter perspective in the other direction, terminating in a red danger light and an entrance to a black tunnel. The place had an earthy, deadly smell, and so much cold wind rushed through it that it struck chill to me, as if I had left the natural world. I walked nearer to him, near enough to have touched him, and he had not stirred. Then, without removing his eyes from mine, he stepped back. One step. Well, a visitor must be a rarity, I said. Not an unwelcome one, I hoped. I'm far from sure of the words I used. There was something in the man that daunted me. He now directed a most curious look towards the red danger light near the tunnel's mouth. Looked all around it, as if there was something missing from it, and then looked back at me. Well, I inquired whether that light was in his charge. He spoke at last. Don't you know it is? The monstrous thought came into my mind that this was not a man, but a spirit. I stepped back. In doing so, I detected in his eyes some latent fear of me. But you look at me, said I, as if you had a dread of me. I thought I'd seen you before. Oh, where? There, at the red light? Oh, my good fellow, what should I do at the mouth of a tunnel? I never was there, you may swear. I think I may swear. I'm sure I may. His manner cleared, like my own. He took me into his signal box. Ooh, well, there was a fire. He replied to my remarks with readiness. Yes, exactitude was what was required of him, to change this signal, to trim that light. He was several times interrupted by the electric bell and had to read off messages. I observed him to be remarkably exact and vigilant. Except that twice, while he was speaking to me, twice he broke off with a fallen colour, turned his face to the electric bell at a moment when it had not rung, got up, opened the door, and looked out towards the mouth of the tunnel, towards the red danger light. Both times he came back to the fire with the same inexplicable air upon him as when I had first seen him. Said I, when I rose to leave him, Well, you almost make me think that I have met with a contented man. I must acknowledge that I said it to draw him out. I used to be a contented man, sir, but with this trouble... He would have recalled the words, if he could. Trouble, said I? What trouble? Oh, 'tis a hard thing to speak of, sir. He opened the door and wished me good night. Oh, before you go, sir, he called out, when you stood at the top there, what made you call out, hello, below there? Why, heaven knows, I did shout something to that effect. Because I saw you, below. What? What other reason could I possibly have? He hesitated, then beckoned me in again and closed the door. I've made up my mind, sir, that you shall not have to ask me twice what troubles me. We sat again by the fire. He spoke in a little above a whisper. An hour ago, I took you for someone else. I don't know who. I never saw the face. The left arm is across the face and the right arm is waved. Oh, yes. That were like this, yes. His action was that of an arm gesticulating with the utmost passion and vehemence as he held his other arm over his eyes. He continued. Last year it started, sir. One moonlight night I was sitting here when I heard a voice. Hello, below there. Well, I jumped up, opened that door, and I saw this someone standing by the red light near the tunnel, waving, just as I showed you. I got hold of my lamp, I turned it on red, and I ran towards this. Well, it was standing just in front of the black mouth of the tunnel. I ran right up. Well, I come so close that I wondered at the sleeve, still across the eyes. I had my hand out to pull the sleeve away. It was gone. No, not into the tunnel. I ran into the tunnel, held up my lamp, and saw the wet stains creeping down the walls. I ran out again, come in here, and I telegraphed both ways. An alarm has been given. Is anything wrong? Back come the answer both ways. All well. Well, I explained to him that strange shapes are often known to trouble the delicate nerves of the eye. As to an imaginary cry, well, listen to the wind in this unnatural valley, and to the wild harp it makes of the telegraph wires. That's all very well, sir. I haven't finished. Within 6 hours of what I've described to you, the accident happened, and through the tunnel, over the spot where I'd seen what I'd seen, they brought the dead. I have not finished. I was last here one morning 5 months ago as the day was breaking. I looked towards the tunnel. No, it was silent and did not wave an arm. It was leaning against a shaft of light with both hands covering the face. Oh, yes, like this. Once more I followed his action with my eyes. It was an action of mourning. I've seen such an attitude in stone figures, on tombs. He dropped his arms and went on quickly. I come in and sat down, feeling faint. The very day as the train came out of the tunnel, I noticed at the carriage window hands and heads, handkerchief fluttering. I saw just in time to signal the driver. He shut off, put his brake on. A woman was brought in here and put down on this floor between us. She'd been took ill in the train and died here. Now, sir, mark this and judge how my mind is troubled. A week ago, it came back. Ever since, off and on, it's been there. I, the red light, have no peace nor rest. Goes on calling for minutes at a time. Hello, below there, look out, look out, look out, look out, look out. It stands waving. It rings that bell. I caught at that. Just now, when twice you went to the door, had your bell rung then? It had. Now see how your imagination misleads you. My eyes were on that bell, and as I am a living man, it did not ring at those times. He shook his head. I heard it. And when I went to the door and looked out, it was there, both times. The wind and the wires took up the story with a long, lamenting wail. My mouth It was very dry, as I said at last. "Will you come to the door with me now and look?" We went together to the door. Together, we looked out into the night. There was the red danger light. There was the black mouth of the tunnel. There were the high, wet stones of the cutting. There were the stars. He shook his head, spoke in a whisper. "No, it's not there." I went in again. He closed the door. "What does it mean, sir? What's the danger this time?" "There is danger. Up the line, hanging over some train that's due here, some worse accident. What can I do? If I telegraph danger, I can give no reason for it. They would dismiss me. They would think I was mad." Well, I saw that for the poor man's sake, as well as for the public safety, what I had to do was to compose his mind. I explained to him that any man who thoroughly discharged his duty as he did must do well. He became calm. At 2 a.m, I left him. Well, I had offered to stay the night, but he would not hear of it. I walked away along the double line of rails with a very disagreeable sensation of a train coming behind me. And I see no reason to conceal that as I ascended the path, I more than once looked back at the danger light, and that I should have slept but poorly if my bed had been under it. How ought I to act? I resolved to return to him the next night, offer to accompany him to a wise medical practitioner, and take his opinion. Next evening was a lovely one, and I walked out early to enjoy it. The sun was not yet quite down when I reached the top of the deep cutting. I would extend my walk for an hour, and it would then be time to climb down to the signalman's box. Before pursuing my stroll, I stepped to the brink, and I looked down. Close to the red danger light, close to the black mouth of the tunnel, there stood a group of men. On the ground in front of the group, a tarpaulin covering a huddled shape. I descended the path with all the speed I could muster. "Oh, what's the matter?" One of the group knelt down and raised an end of the tarpaulin. The face of the dead signalman was quite composed. "He has been run over by a train, sir. This morning, broad daylight. We're still waiting for him to come down for the... Well, as the engine come out of the tunnel, sir, that young fellow drove it. Tom, tell the gentleman," his companion stepped forward. I was coming round the curve in the tunnel when I seed him at the end with his back to me. No time to check speed. I blew the whistle. He didn't seem to take heed. We was running right on top of him. I shut off. He turned round and stared up at we run right on top of him." I looked from him to the dead face. But my natural shock at the sight of death was already giving way to a premonition of most unnatural news, and I looked from the dead face back to the driver of the train. "But no man in his senses," said I, "with a train bearing down upon him, will stay rooted to the spot." And then I asked him the one question to which I craved the answer, yet it was the answer which I dreaded to hear. "What did you do, man?" said I to the driver of the train. "What did you do to make this man lose all power of movement? What did you do to kill him?" He gave the answer, and as he spoke the words, I felt the slow touch of a frozen finger down my spine. "I done nothing, sir, I swear it. I just shut off and called to him as loud as I could call. Eh? What? Oh, I said, 'Hello, below there, look out.' I never left off calling to him. Then I had to cover my eyes. I couldn't help it." As he spoke, in shuddering retrospect, he drew his left sleeve over his face. "But to the last I tried to wave him away." With the other hand, he made the motion he described, and in his attitude I recognized too well the pose which the dead man had demonstrated to me. "But," whispered the driver, "it was no use." Overcome, he hid his face in both hands. It was an action of mourning. I have seen such an attitude in stone figures on tombs.